everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 331. That is not an April Fool's joke. That's really where we are. And tonight we are going to complete our discussion, he says confidently, of the Book of Mazarbul, or at least the bits of the Book of Mazarbul that Gandalf can read, or at least the bits of the Book of Mazarbul that Gandalf can read that he transmits to the company. So that's, in fact, what we're going to be doing tonight. Not a joke. I am such a sucker for April Fool's jokes. Like, I have I have come to endure April Fool's Day every year with gritted teeth because I know I'm going to get suckered into. I just never think of it. It never occurs to me. I can never even remember what day of the week it is, so like, anyway, whatever. So let's just move forward with straightforward and honest discussion of the text. But first, a quick announcement. Well, in addition to the fact that it is Tex Moot this weekend, so I invite you guys to join us for our Moot Fun in Texas this weekend. Where I'm going to be down in Houston. So anyone who is in the greater Houston area, which, given how great the Houston area is, that's most of Texas. So we're gonna be hanging out this Saturday, the 5th of April. Really looking forward to that. And our next moot after that, I'm coming back across over to Europe to all the folks who are asleep right now because I hold this so late at night. But in any case, I'm going to Belgium. My first ever trip I've never been to Belgium before. So my first ever trip to Belgium, we're going to be in Leuven, Belgium on the 26th of April for Willow Moot, for another European moot. Really hoping to, looking forward to seeing a bunch of folks that we saw last year at UK Moot. Some of them will hopefully be able to come down, I believe. And then some of the folks I know from Stuttmoot last October in Germany, we're hoping to make it out to Willow Moot this month. So, and of course, looking forward to meeting a bunch of new people from that part of Europe. So, in any case, we are going to have a great time in Leuven on the 26th of April. And after that, coming up in May is Mountain Moot, finally. Coming back to Denver for Mountain Moot at the very end of May. Yeah, so anyway, so that's what those are the moots immediately coming up. But I also wanted to tell you about a special that our space program is running this month. They're running the Booster Pack special this month. What that means is it gives people who are brand new to the program the opportunity to try out one of our space modules for only $75. It's a month-long module. You have a live synchronous class with classmates and a teacher for a month-long module. $75. The mechanism for that is what we call the booster pack. So when you sign up to BlackBerry for the first time, you'll get a booster pack, which is a sort of coupon that you trade in. It enables you to buy your first token. Each of our modules are one token each. So it enables you to buy your first token for $75. So that's the mechanics of how it works. But basically it means you can try a space module for $75. The Booster Pack special also is something you can also get a Booster Pack coupon if you refer a friend. So if you refer a friend you will find on your BlackBerry account, if you already have one, which you would need to in order to refer a friend, of course, a little button that you can push to get a referral link to send them to. And if you refer a friend and they sign up for a class, then you get a Booster Pack coupon so that you can get again, more than 50% off on your next space module. Yeah, Josh says, come learn Quenya with us. Yeah, the Quenya module is going to be awesome. So yes, all of you who have been interested in the language stuff that we've been talking about, so many wonderful language opportunities that you can dig into in space. So, very good. All right, so wanted to make sure that you knew about the Booster Pack special. In the meantime, Dr. Will, hey, congratulations. Congratulations on catching up and joining us live. Always fun when people catch up. I know even many people who catch up can't attend the Tuesday night sessions live and so are still listening asynchronously even though they've caught up. But Dr. Will, great to have you, and it's always fun to find people who catch up. I know you'll enjoy being here amongst all the regular suspects and everything. All right. Well, Jack, you could say chaos, but I wasn't going to say it that way, but yeah. All right. Anyhow, let us get back to the text. So I put, I'm keeping off. I learned my lesson last time when I moved one down. I just moved it back. I'm gonna keep them all here in case I want to flip back and forth among them. But let's move on to the third one. So remember, we just segued to Ori's Elvish use of the Elvish script. "I fear he had ill tidings to record in a fair hand," said Gandalf. "The first clear word is sorrow, but the rest of the line is lost unless it ends in estra. Yes, it must be yestra, followed by day, being the 10th of November. Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimril Dale. He went alone to look in Miramir. An orc shot him from behind a stone. We slew the orc, but many more up east from the Silver Lode." The remainder of the page is so blurred that I can hardly make anything out, but I think I can read, "We have barred the gates, and then can hold them long if, and then perhaps horrible, and suffer." Poor Balin. He seems to have kept the title that he took for less than 5 years. I wonder what happened afterwards. But there is no time to puzzle out the last few pages. Here is the last page of all. He paused and sighed. "It is grim reading," he said. "I fear their end was cruel. Listen, we cannot get out. We cannot get out. They have taken the bridge and the second hall. Frar and Lonnie and Nolly fell there." Then there are 4 lines smeared so that I can only read, "Went 5 days ago." The last lines run, "The pool is up to the wall at Westgate. The watcher in the water took Owen. We cannot get out. The end comes." And then, "Drums. Drums in the deep." I wonder what that means. "The last thing written is in a trailing scrawl of elf letters. They are coming." There is nothing more. Gandalf paused and stood in silent thought. Fourth Dauntless, that's a great question. Are those dwarf names also out of the Voluspa? I don't know. I didn't think to look. It's an excellent question. Anybody who happens to have the Voluspa to hand, that's a really cool question. Just to contextualize it, to make sure everybody's following. So, of course, the names of almost all of the dwarves in The Hobbit and the Wizard, for reasons. Gandalf, of course, is also one of them because he was originally a dwarf. Long story. But anyway, okay, no, I can't just say it like that. Most of you know this, right? But Gandalf was not originally the name of the wizard. The name of the wizard was Bloodorthin, and Gandalf was the name of the head of the dwarves. Halfway through the writing of The Hobbit, he decided that Gandalf would be better for the wizard, so he shifted the name from the dwarf captain to the wizard and changed the dwarf captain's name to Thorin. This happens when Thorin crawls out of the barrel at Lake Town. That moment is one of the 2 places where the composition process of the Hobbit paused, and when he came back to it, he made that change. So when Thorin is bedraggled out of his barrel on the shores of Lake Town, he is finally Thorin Oakenshield. But in any case, okay. So David Michael says Lonnie, which means lazy person. That's in there. Yeah. Okay. Right. Green Great Dragon says, yet somehow Gandalf is wand elf. Yeah, well, there's a good reason for that. And that's because elf was used of the dwarves also. Like, it was a much more generic name in Old Norse. Much more generic word, I mean, in Old Norse. Okay, so, yes, great. David Michael Roberts has confirmed that these are all, that Frar, Lonnie, and Nali are, in fact, from Voluspa. So the dwarf names that Tolkien came up with in The Hobbit, he pulls them out of the list of dwarf names in the Voluspa, and with one exception. With one exception, but he. So it is a really fascinating question as to whether or not, when he came up with these new names, whether he was using the same source, whether he went back to the same source, and he did. So that's fun. That's really cool. By the way, do you know the exception? Which one of the dwarves in The Hobbit is not from the Voluspa? Balin, actually. Balin is not from the Voluspa. Balin's name is a bit of a mystery. It's it's one of those things. There are a lot of people who really, really love looking at Tolkien's source texts. It's never been a passion of mine. It's interesting, but it's never been a centerpiece for me. But for people who do really focus on that, Balin's name's always been a bit of a mystery. Because yes, Johnny and Azanul Bazar, Balin is a name, seems to be, I mean, the only source, when people are trying to find a source for Balin's name, the only one they could come up with is Maori, Le Mort d'Arthur. And Sir Balin is about the worst. Sir Balin from Mallory is like the Turin Turambar of King Arthur's court, basically, in the sense that he's a great knight, but everything he does is wrong, and every decision he makes is horrible, and he brings about his own, and he ends up fighting to the death with his own brother, and anyway, it's, if you know, people who don't know Mallory very well will see that fact, that Balin is a prominent knight in Mallory, and be like, oh yeah, that must be where he's getting it. People who do know Mallory well are like, no, that just doesn't work. But it's true, Mothrak, that Tolkien had a soft spot for Turin Turambar. I agree. It's just that there are really, in my mind, no discernible links between Balin the dwarf and Sir Balin. I mean, I don't see it at all. Johnny, I think that's the answer. I think it conveniently rhymes with Dwalin. Dwalin, or Dvalin, is a very famous dwarf, probably the most famous dwarf. If anything, it's odd that he chooses, that Dwalin gets such a minor role, because Dwalin was a big deal. Anyway, yeah, and yeah, Fundin is from the Voluspa as well. Yeah. But Dvalin is big, much bigger than he is in The Hobbit. So I think so too. And again, it's one of the things that when I talk about source criticism, or people who are focused on Tolkien sources, it's very interesting. There's a lot of really fascinating things to discover that way. But this is one of the places, and it's fairly early on in the process, where I kind of part company with people who really focus on Tolkien sources, because there's a lot of energy that's expended to be like, this must be from somewhere. What could be his source? And I'm like, I think he just made it up. He just made it up. He, I think, does that. Just make stuff up sometimes. He doesn't, there isn't a source for everything. And anyway, it's, but yeah. I think probably Dwalin and Balin are he was made up to, and so it's interesting that he didn't choose Dwalin, the more famous of the two names, to make the more prominent character. One of our second tier dwarfs, as we were discussing last time. Instead, he chose his rhyming made up, brother, to be that. I think probably because Tolkien himself had too many associations with Dwalin, right? Dwalin was sort of too major a character. But anyway. Yeah, Lady Lakata says it's almost like Tolkien was an author. I know, right? I know. It is. There are occasionally times in some discussions that I hear people having about this stuff where I feel like reminding folks that, like, Tolkien does, in fact, at times, make things up in his own self, out of his own head. Anyway, okay. Hang on. One quick thing I wanted to look at. I want to make sure I didn't make a mistake in the formatting. Is there supposed to be a line break before up east, up the silver load? Or did I mess that up? I'm just looking it up in my printed text here. Yeah, no, there's not. Okay, hang on a second. I'm just going to fix that because it's bothering me. Okay. There we go. That's how it's supposed to look. And while I'm at it, I'll put that in. There we go. All kinds of errors here that I'm fixing. Line breaks are one of the things when I copy and paste the text, the line breaks get all messed up. So that is... Okay, there we go. All right. Let's continue in the path that we did before. First, let's look at the text itself, and then, that is the text of the book, sort of as far as we can on its own ground, and then let's look at the way that Gandalf comments on it, and then the way in which it's presented to us. Okay, so Ori has taken over with his Tengwar in order to speak of their sorrow. The first clear word is sorrow, but the rest of the line is lost. But then Gandalf pieces out, yesterday, being the 10th of November, Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimril Dale. He went alone to look in Miramir. An orc shot him from behind a stone. We slew the orc, but many more up east up the Silver Lode. Okay, so first of all, the 10th of November, right? Who's translating what here, right? I feel pretty sure that Ori didn't write the word November. November is, when we read November, we are reading an English translation by that guy, that researcher, Tolkien, who found the copy of the Red Book, right? And is translating it for us. So that is an English translation of... Now, we know what the Shire calendar is. Oh, shoot. Hang on. What's November? It's not Blotmath. That's October, isn't it? What's November? Blanking on the it's For Yule. No, that's December. For Yule is December. Darn it. Somebody help me remember what November was. I've forgotten already. Hallowmath is September. Yeah, Hallowmath is the 9th month. Winterfilth. It is Blotmath. Winterfilth is the 10th month, right? It's Hallowmath is the 9th month, and then Winterfilth, and then Blotmath. Okay. All right. So my first guess was right, actually. There we go. How about that? Blotmath. Okay, so that is, if he's translating into the Shire calendar, Frodo would have actually written Blotmath. And Tolkien, the English translator, would have rendered that as November. So presumably, the use of the word November here in this line indicates that Frodo wrote the word Blotmath in the original. So that means that right, JJ's point. The non-capitalization of November is bothering JJ, and he's pointing out that in the appendix, Blotmath is capitalized. Yes. Okay. So hang on, let's think this through. In the text, consistently, that is the Lord of the Rings text, consistently, we get references using the English months, right? In the letter that Butterbird didn't send, Gandalf urges Frodo to leave not later than the end of July, right? All of those things. So we get lots of references to the calendar lots of references to the calendar in the text, and they all use English months. Bilbo's birthday also. Yep. Talking about September, of course. Yes. From the beginning, we get everything in English months. What he tells us in the calendar appendix. Oh shoot. Is that C? Or is it D? I get the middle appendices confused as far as which letter is which. Which one is the family trees and which one is the calendars? It's D. Okay. Yeah. C is family trees. D is calendars. Right. Okay. Yeah. Those are the two that I always forget which order they're in. Okay. In Appendix D, he tells us about the actual dating in Shire reckoning, right? The actual Shire calendar. So, okay. Day being the 10th of Blotmath is presumably, since the word November is here used, presumably what Frodo wrote. So the question is that Frodo translating it, or is that Gandalf translating it? Did Gandalf, at the moment when he's holding the Book of Mazarbul, actually say the 10th of November? And I think it possible that I don't find it difficult to believe that Gandalf would have done that. Presumably the dwarves would have been using their own calendar. It's such an interesting puzzle to create. So I'm just pausing to wonder why on earth Tolkien says this. Does it matter? Do we need to know what day of the month it was? And by the way, since we are told what day of the month it is, why do we never commemorate the death of Balin on the 10th of November? Feels like a remembrance we should maintain. Do we need to know this? Yeah, I see. David Michael is mapping the Shire calendar. So one of the things when we do take dates from Middle-earth and observe them in our calendars, right? Because it sounds the same. Like, for instance, Gondorian New Year on March 25th, right? We observe Gondorian New Year on March 25th. But of course, it wouldn't actually have been March 25th. If it's the 25th day of the third month, it would have been a different day. Because the Shire calendar works differently than ours works. So David Michael is saying that blot math, of course, actually would start on our 21st of October and go to the 19th of our November. That is to count the days out, actually, in practical terms. That is correct. The normal practice, which is a sloppy practice, but the normal sloppy practice is just to take the 12 months as being the rough equivalents of each other and considering the 10th of November to mean the 10th of blot math. Even though I agree, David Michael, technically, of course, that would not be the case. So yeah, hang on. Before we even get back to the question of who is saying what exactly there, why is he saying it at all? I think merely the fact that that they are commemorating the observance. But it's strange because you would think that there would have been other dates that they would have used. It's possible, of course, that we're supposed to understand it to be some sort of coincidence that Gandalf could only read them. Could only read this one, rather. But, yeah. Yeah, it's the eve of Veterans Day. Yeah, exactly. Wait a second. November 10th? So, there are a couple reasons why Tolkien mentions particular dates in the story. Sometimes I think, it's just to, provide a kind of verisimilitude that is thinking about the count, like Bilbo's birthday, for instance. In the anticipation, the counting down the days until Bilbo's birthday in September. But Bob, that is exactly what I was just building up to. I was going to say that's one, just like specific dates for the sake of verisimilitude. A second is coordination of dates, especially as the story starts to spread, and you've got multiple plot lines all going on together. Anchoring things to particular days helps people to keep track of things. But the third reason why Tolkien provides some specific days is when there is a specific significance to that day. Like the fact we all know what day they departed Rivendell, Christmas Day, December 25th, and March 25th as well. Yes. Those are both important days. And Dr. Benway and Bob the Three-Quarterling, that is exactly what I was just thinking. Of course, I finally just clicked and I got out of my Americanness when people were talking about it's the day before Veterans Day. More importantly, it's the day before Armistice Day. More importantly for Tolkien, December 11th is Armistice Day, the day of the end of World War I. So, why? Did I not say November just now? Sorry, I might have said it wrong. November 11th. If I said something different, I apologize. November 11th is Armistice Day. I said December, sorry. Apologies. Yeah, November is what I meant. November 11th is Armistice Day. The end of World War I. I mean, in Tolkien's lifetime, that was huge. Huge. So, on the one hand, for Dauntless, I can understand. He says, I think he would have chosen that date if he meant for us to think of that. I'm guessing it was actively avoided, in which case, he could have chosen a different month. Like, why the day before Armistice Day? I mean, nothing depends on this date. I mean, it's decades in the past from here. There is no impact. There can be no possible relevance to the timeline of the story or anything like that. Balin could have died in November. He could have died in March. He could have died in June. It doesn't matter, right? So, but Tolkien went out of his way. Tolkien went out of his way to choose the day before Armistice Day. I don't want to invest that with massive meaning. That is, it's not that I am assuming that just because of the proximity of the date of Balin's death with Armistice Day, that there must necessarily be some kind of message, right, that Tolkien is sending or something. But yeah, Dr. Benway, that's what I keep coming back to. It mattered enough to him to the professor to set out a specific date. Yes. Well, David Michael Roberts, that's exactly what I was just doing. David Michael Roberts says, just think of those soldiers who were killed on the 10th of November, 1918, the day before the end of the war. Yes, which did in fact happen. There were casualties on November 10th. And yeah, no, that's precisely what I was just thinking and wondering if Tolkien was thinking about. But anyway, I don't understand. Since that day has to have been, that is the 11th of November, has to have been very prominent in Tolkien's world. Right? I mean, it's Armistice Day. For everyone who participated in World War I personally, right, Armistice Day has to have very significant meaning. And again, there is no motivation. I can understand no internal pressure within the story to choose that day above literally any other day of the year. And therefore, I can't shake the fact that the proximity between this, I mean, it's like, it would be exactly like if I as an American were writing this story and I just chose for Balin to die on the 3rd of July. Well, it's not the 4th of July, right? But why, if I had any day in the year to choose, why would I choose the 3rd of July, right? It's weird. I mean, that would be weird because I'd be creating an association which I could easily avoid if I wanted to. And he could have. And so I have to conclude he didn't want to. I can't believe. I find it strains credulity to imagine that it just didn't occur to him. Not Armistice Day for a World War I veteran. So I think he's got to be, I have to think there's some kind of association in his mind. Now, what that association is and how it works, the other example, like take the Christmas example, right? There are some symbolic parallels between Christmas and the setting out of the quest. This works like as a kind of sort of spiritual symbolism overlay, but it's not strong. Like the link there isn't obvious. The thing that happens on December 25th in the book is not obviously Christmas-like, right? In any clear or simple way. Yeah, Dr. Benway, that's where I'm sitting right now. It may not be readily apparent why he put it in, but he did put it in for a reason. I have to think that there's a reason. And here's my own personal best guess. Armistice Day is a day of celebration. But for Tolkien, it has to be. Armistice Day is also freighted with the memorialization of all of the soldiers who died in World War I, including all of his best friends. Almost all of his best friends, right? 2 of his 3 best friends. For Tolkien, the memory, memorializing the dead in battle in World War I was a deeply personal memory. And not only just because of his own service and the people that he served with and will have seen die at the Somme. There's that, but it's not only the death of soldiers in World War I was not only real to him because he was part of it and experienced it and it happened around him, and he, had to look out at fields strewn with corpses. Also, again, his best friends were killed very close to each other in what that was in 1916, wasn't it? Well, that's interesting. November 10th, 1916 was Tolkien's first day back home in hospital from the war. That's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, those 2 things combined. A, the date that he chose, which again he has no reason that I can see to choose it. Again, there's no internal pressure from the story. Well, obviously the death of Balin had to happen in November. He had no choice. There's no connection to anywhere else in the calendar, right? The fact that he chose this date, right near but not on Armistice Day, which is associated, and I think would certainly have been associated by Tolkien with the remembrance of the dead. And he chose that to be the day that Balin dies. Remember what just happened. That is, remember where we started this chapter. We started this chapter with Frodo standing by Balin's tomb and remembering Balin and Bilbo's friendship with Balin. Right? And now we find out that Bilbo's old friend died right near Armistice Day, the day on which you remember your dead friends from the war, right? Yeah. So yeah, I remember that the dates change. He didn't give a date. Well, that is interesting. Hang on a second, JJ. In the first draft of this passage, he didn't include the date. Okay. Actually, in my mind, that makes it almost more conspicuous, frankly. like, when revising this passage, he said to himself, I need to put a date on which they're commemorating there you go. JJ was just pasting Christopher's comment where he explains that the date of Balin's death is absent in that first draft. Okay. Yes. Hang on, Jackie. What's that quote from? The quote about St. Andrew? That's, of course, the other thing to keep in mind with Tolkien. Most of the dates that are significant on the Catholic calendar. Okay. November 10th is the Feast of St. Andrew, the special patron against sudden death. Anyway, I don't know. Here's my take on, and I incline in this direction chiefly because even if the Armistice Day thing were right out of the picture, I would still be thinking this. There's no point of giving the date apart from providing a glimpse, even a theoretical glimpse, into the commemoration of the date in grief. Notice dates haven't been given for anything else. We don't know on what day of what month Balin took up his seat in Moria. We don't even know on what day of what month they won the battle in the Dale in order to, in Dimrildale, in order to under the bright sun, in order to gain entrance into Moria. We don't know on what day the, quest for Durin's, the Raiders of the Lost Axe was completed. And the Something Helm. We don't know on what day Balin named himself Lord of Moria, but we know on what day he died. And that seems to point in the direction of commemoration. Yeah. Oh, November 10th is St. Andrew's Death Day? Okay, I see. It's not the Feast of St. Andrew, but it's St. Andrew's Death Day. Okay. Yep. Anyway. Whichever. So that he wants... So even without the Armistice Day connection, I would be thinking that the point of giving us the date at all is to suggest a solemnity, right? That Ori, who wrote this passage, seems to me certainly to intend that the date, the 10th of November, should always be remembered as the day on which Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimrildale. Even the phrasing, yesterday, he could have just said, yesterday Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimrildale. That would have been a, suitable way to record the sad event. But he pauses to say, yesterday, being the 10th of November, Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimrildale. It does suggest that the 10th of November is a day to remember. Indeed. Yes, exactly. So that's what and to me, the Armistice Day adjacency really solidifies that I mean, again, it's the impulse I have from the sentence anyway. The Armistice Day connection seems to me to strengthen that considerably. I would suspect that he didn't make it Armistice Day itself because he didn't want to be too right on the nose. And also because, who knows? Maybe he... I mean, again, I have to believe that Armistice Day was something that he took very seriously, Tolkien. Especially given the commemoration of his lost friends. Yeah. Okay. He went alone to look in Mirror. That sentence is the one I've always found most haunting in this whole passage. He went alone to look in Mirror. Why? Was this a thing he always did? Right, Kurtzimus, was it seemingly safe to go to and fro? I agree, JJ, presumably at night if the orcs were about. I agree. Yes, Bob, we are told that Durin looked. Durin woke and walked alone and then looked into... stooped and looked in Mirror. That he... Yes, I imagine that the stone mentioned is Durin's stone, Captain Mo. It would almost have to be. An orc shot him from behind a stone. Would Ori say a stone if the orc were hiding behind Durin's stone? The stone that was placed there to commemorate Durin's looking in the Mirror? And Carissa, I tend to agree with you. Lords are never actually alone, but he probably approached the water alone, which is why there were dwarves at hand to slay the orc who did it. They didn't just, he didn't just go to look in Mirror alone, and then he didn't come back and they went looking for him and his body was found later. Like, that's clearly not what happened, right? He was shot. They slew the orc. They, the ones who were at hand but not with him at the time, slew the orc. And Gildalwyn, yes, that's why they knew the orc was behind a stone. That an orc shot him from behind a stone, that sounds like an eyewitness account. Not that Ori necessarily personally was an eyewitness, but like that, that sounds like an eyewitness detail. Absolutely. Yeah. Emma Thorne, I also tend to think it's got to be a random stone. He wouldn't have just called Durin's stone a stone, surely. He might have said the stone, but I can't imagine he would just call Durin's stone a stone. Johnny, I agree that it's quite the contrast to having a crown of stars appear. There's an element of despair. There's also an element of closure. Moria began, Khazad-dûm began, when Durin looked into Mirror and saw the crown of stars appear. Balin goes to look in Mirror, and that's when the Lord of Moria dies. And it's clear that this is the turning point. This is the beginning of the end of the dwarf colony. Philologist me, that's exactly what I'm wondering too. If he was searching for a sign, why did he go? What motivated him? Was he concerned? Remember, and this is why I left the slides in this order. The last notes that we got were all the happy ones. Balin is now Lord of Moria. We found true silver. There was well-forged mithril. We're going to seek the armories of Third Deep. We're going westwards to Holland Gate. All of these things sound cheerful, expansionist, settling in things, right? This is, page one, our slide one, right, is about the establishment of the colony, right? The establishment of the settlement and the retaking of Moria. The second slide is about what sounds like the beginning of the new era of Khazad-dûm. And in the third slide here, we have the descent towards the end. But since we've just come from the high water mark, from all the happy things, and since Balin's death appears to be the beginning of the bad times, which culminate in the annihilation of all the dwarves, there's no real reason to believe that Balin himself was, in a bad headspace, right? That he was in despair or that he was having trouble. It does seem like a very sudden downfall. Because, Jackie, note, this orc that kills Balin is the first of many more that come up from east. It's the beginning of a new invasion of orcs. That presumably is why Balin felt secure to go alone to Miramir, because they haven't had orc troubles. As far as we can see, as far as we are told by Gandalf. But that orc is a bad sign. He is the first of many who are coming up and invading. And notice what happens next. Is a siege of Khazad-dûm at the gates, the great gates, where they fought before. We have barred the gates. That is the East Gate, the Great Gate, the one by Miramir. And they are hopeful that they can hold them for a long time, that they can survive the siege for a long time. But that's when the words horrible and suffer come. Spoiler, this is the sentence we'll get more of when we read the rest of the text with Chad. This was the sentence that blew me away in his presentation last year. After this, we cannot get out. They have taken the bridge in the second hall. So what has happened? The dwarves... So first of all, the orcs were invading from the east. Nancy, coming back to your question for a second. That's really interesting, isn't it? We have been led to understand, or rather, people fear that Moria is awash in orcs. But remember, Gandalf is not completely sure. He's like, if we find orcs there, it's not going to be good. But it's possible. Who knows? Maybe we even find dwarves. Remember that passage? Boromir believes that Moria, like, you can't spit without hitting an orc in Moria. Like, going into Moria is as bad as going up to knock on the doors of Barad-dûr itself. Right, in Boromir's mind. He thinks the place is just full of orcs. But apparently, this is not true, or at least was not true at this time. Balin and his people, are acting as if they beat the orcs at first, and now they've not been having orc problems. He's surprised by this orc, and notice the orc is not emerging from the depths of Khazad-dûm. They're coming from outside. They're invading Moria. I think they have to. Now, keep in mind, I say at that time, because it's now a couple decades after this, and things have been happening lately, right? But if there are orcs coming up east, come up from east, up the Silverlode, they're not coming from Lorien, obviously, right? So they must have gone around Lorien and come up the Silverlode. I have to imagine that these are orcs, Jackie, as you say, from Dol Guldur. Yes. There are plenty of orcs at Dol Guldur. This seems to be an active invasion. By active, I mean, as opposed to a passive invasion. No, I mean, someone set orcs to attack Balin and his people. This does not appear to be... If this were just a, the dwarves invaded Moria and they got away with it for a while, but eventually the orcs said, hey, man, not our Moria. You're not welcome here. We're going to rally ourselves together and kick you back out again, right? If that had been the case, they'd have been coming up from downstairs or from somewhere else in the mountains, right? This is not the mountain orcs of Moria fighting back. This is an invasion from outside. Dr. Benway is remembering the group of orcs that escaped Gollum from Mirkwood. No, I think not the same. Again, decades difference in time between those two things. Those orcs were, well, not decades. That happened. No, it happened. That happened recently. Recently enough that Aragorn hasn't heard of it. The freeing of Gollum, I mean. Yeah. Anyway, still, it's... The point is this was an invasion from outside. From the east, which means Mordor or Dol Guldur. Not Mordor, because Gondor exists. Boromir's big talk about Gondor being the bulwark of the West and keeping all of the other lands behind them free of the servants of the enemy. He didn't know everything that he was talking about there. There are other issues that he knows nothing about, as Aragorn was reminding him, but he's not totally wrong. Gondor does, in fact, keep the crossings of Anduin such that it's really hard to cross, anywhere. So it's very unlikely that they came all the way from Mordor. So this would have been almost certainly from Osgiliath. Yes, the freeing of Gollum occurs simultaneously with the attack on Osgiliath. Yes, much more recently than the 20 years ago or so that this was happening. Again, this does not... Too much time has passed for this to be giving us clear information about what... clear information about what is going on now, right, and who's where now. But yeah, they would have come from Dol Guldur, I think almost certainly. Which means Sauron or the Nazgul in charge of Dol Guldur chose to send orcs to roust out the dwarves in Moria. I mean, how did that happen? How did that work? I'm not really sure, right? I mean, did the Balrog send Sauron a text, right? Like, hey man, there are these like dwarves or something. It's getting really annoying. Could you, I can't be bothered, but could you, send a mop-up crew. I don't know. But this was an invasion from without. And we can see the progress of that invasion, right? At first, they are holding them off at the gate. So they don't take the dwarves completely by surprise. The dwarves are able to... Now notice, they didn't bar the gates before. They haven't been holding the gates. We have barred the gates. Like just now we barred the gates. Presumably in response to this attack up the Silverload. So they were aware of it in time to defend the Great Gate. The fact that they weren't already defending the Great Gate, of course, it's possible that, he had, what he said was, fortunately, years ago we have barred the gates, but I don't think so. I think that this suggests that any trouble that they were expecting to come from within, not from without. But they managed to erect some defenses and are hoping that they can keep the orcs out of Moria. But it's obvious that they fail. They have taken the bridge and the second hall. So there's the first hall right inside the gate. And then there's the bridge. And then there's the second hall. So the dwarves are pushed back beyond the whole point of the bridge of Khazad-dûm is that it's a defense. That it forces invaders to come in single file. So if they get the gates, they will surely not get past the bridge. But they did get past the bridge. They have taken the bridge and the second hall. And that means they're in. And it also means that dwarves can't escape. How on earth did they take that bridge? Numbers, I have to assume. I have to assume that very, very many orcs invaded from Dol Guldur here. The dwarves are not numerous and surely would have been overwhelmed if the orcs could just bring enough numbers. So yes, I agree, Aranas, it does seem almost certainly to demonstrate that this is not a random roving band of orcs, but a full-on invasion force. Yes. What were the Galathrim doing is an excellent question, which perhaps ought to be directed towards Celeborn. And yes, I agree with Fourth Dauntless that choke points will limit the advantage of numbers, but it won't remove it entirely. If they can keep coming, then they can keep coming. Yes, you can eventually work your way past a good choke point. I agree with Amathorn. I have a hard time imagining Sauron does not know about the Balrog. Very hard time. Again, it seems to me very likely. It seems to me very likely that Sauron or the servants of Sauron were involved in the rousing of the Balrog originally. The fact that the Balrog is awakening at that time and that the dwarves of Khazad-dûm are being ousted by the Balrog in such close proximity to the dates in which the Witch King is making his moves to destroy Arnor. That seems too conspicuous to me. Yeah. And yes, Trifle, I agree. Sauron would have a source of information that the free people of Middle-earth would not have, and that is the reports of the orcs who could come and go freely from Moria. So yeah. Fort Thala, Sauron was not active so far as we know, but at that point, but it was almost 2,000 years after, his defeat in the War of the Last Alliance. I think there's every reason to believe that Sauron was already taking shape. He hadn't sort of quasi-revealed himself as the necromancer yet, I don't think. So yeah, like, where was he? Right. We don't know for sure. Would Sauron have a Palantir at this time? Well, Dr. Benway, you know what was also happening at about this time? Yeah, the taking of Minas Ithil was also happening at about this time. It was a busy time. Yeah. Garth Galerius, I thought the Balrog was aroused in the Second Age. I don't know why you would think that. That'd be crazy, right? No, not in the books. Yes, that is an adaptation intervention in the Rings of Power. Yeah. I get it. Still don't love it, but I get it. The parallel between the downfall of the dwarves of Khazad-dûm and the downfall of Númenor is too tempting to resist. I can see it. I can understand that. But, yeah. Okay. Thank you for reminding me of that date trifle. Circa 1100 is when an evil takes residence in Dol Guldur. Says it was thought to be a Nazgul, but also possibly Sauron himself. Yeah. That seems to be the early. It doesn't prove that was the moment at which he was there, but it seems. I mean, it's the best information it's the best guess we have as to where he was at that time. Anyway, okay. Point is, obviously an invasion force, obviously a large and concerted invasion force, and sent from Dol Guldur. Then there are 4 lines smeared so that I can only read "went 5 days ago." The pool is up to the wall at Westgate. Remember, this is the section I skipped. We cannot get out, focusing on the bridge in the second hall. This, of course, is the downside to the defensive structure that is the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, is that in order for it to be an effective defensive structure, it has to in fact be the only way in from the east. And therefore, when the orcs take the bridge and the second hall, the dwarves have no escape. So it seems that "went 5 days ago" refers to Westgate, to try to see. And how different is this from the go westwards to Holland Gate before? Notice, even by calling it Holland Gate, in the context of having just found true silver and something about well-forged mithril, I was talking about, it sounds like they're ready to begin traffic again, right? Start trade. And calling it Holland Gate is like a memory of that. Now, the elves of Holland aren't there to trade with anymore, but the going westwards to Holland Gate, again, it sounds expansionist. It sounds like, hey, if we can open the western gate, the Holland Gate, then we can begin trade again. Undoubtedly, they, the dwarves, are thinking of trade with the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, right? But now the trip to Westgate is an escape plan. Their last hope. Can we get to Westgate? They don't all go. They send a team to see if they can get out that way. And the tragedy is that they made it to Westgate. In other words, yes, it was possible. Once more, orcs have not infested Moria. Think of that entire path that the company has already walked from Westgate. The whole way was free of orcs. The orcs have overrun the gate, the bridge, the second hall. But the way to Westgate is clear enough to go. Except now the pool is up to the wall at Westgate, and the Watcher in the Water took Owen. Graham says, yes, exactly. There were some orcs under that well, if those noises were any indication. Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, indeed, you were right. They went all the way to Westgate and then back. Some of them, anyway, to report this. So yes, the problem isn't the orcs of Moria rising up. Nor, apparently, at least to this point, is the Balrog the issue. We cannot get out. The final and third repetition of we cannot get out. He starts, we cannot get out, meaning they can't get out Eastgate. They have taken the bridge in the second hall. Frar and Loni and Nali fell there in the battle at the bridge. Then there are 4 lines smeared so that I can only read went 5 days ago. So in those 4 lines, they seem to be talking about their only choice. Something along the lines of, we must abandon Khazad-dûm. Our only hope now is if we can escape through the West Gate. We will send an expedition to see if that way is clear. X number of dwarves, or, Owen and these others went 5 days ago. Something along those lines, it seems, right? But then the last lines. The pool is up to the gate. The Watcher in the Water took Owen. We cannot get out. The end comes. And then drums in the deep. I wonder what that means, Gandalf asks, or notes. And then in a trailing scrawl of elf letters, they are coming. Written, apparently, the trailing scrawl. Written, apparently, as the orcs are attacking. They are coming. Everett is wondering if the enumeration of casualties indicate how few the dwarves were. It's possible. I doubt there's like single digits of dwarves left at this point. First of all, I think if there were, they would have all gone to Westgate, right? They wouldn't have sent an expedition. The fact that they sent an expedition suggests that there's still many of them. I don't know how. We don't know how many there were in the first place, so I don't know how many are left. Yeah. Yeah, Lincoln says, in my earlier reads through the book, I always assumed the orcs were in the lower levels of the mines during the company's march through Moria. Yes, I think that's true. But remember, it was 20 years ago when this was happening. And that doesn't seem to be their concern. Again, we have to keep in mind that these are two different periods of time. It's a different time now, and whatever all the bad guys are up to, it's in a different place now than it was 20 years before. So we absolutely cannot assume that the conditions that the Fellowship has found are the same as the conditions when Balin was there. Cunctator, I think that the named dwarves are named for dying notable deaths. My own suspicion, they have taken the bridge in Second Hall. Frar and Lonnie and Nali fell there. How I read that is that they fought them off at the choke point for as long as they could. But they couldn't. They knew they couldn't keep them for long. So Frar and Lonnie and Nali sacrificed their lives holding the bridge while the rest of them escaped. That's always been my suspicion about Frar and Lonnie and Nali and why they're named. Because even though surely many dwarves have died, and I don't doubt all of them heroically in the defense so far, it's only those 3 that are named, and they're named in the context of the orcs taking the bridge and the Second Hall. So I think it's like that many dwarves have died, but the sacrifice of Frar and Lonnie and Nali to enable the rest of them to survive is what is being commemorated here. That's my suspicion. So drums in the deep. Gandalf draws our attention to this. I wonder what that means. Some immediate foreshadowing here, or very imminent foreshadowing. Is there a connection? Are we supposed to imagine a connection between the Balrog and the beating of the drums in the deep? I think it's possible. I think it's possible. In particular, the deep part. Now, where they are, like if they're here in the Chamber of Mazarbul, which apparently they were, as their corpses are still lying there, if they were here in the Chamber of Mazarbul, the gates and the Second Hall are below them, right? Well below them, we know. So the orc drums, if the orcs are beating drums, they would sound like they're coming from deep below them, right? No question. I don't think it is necessary to assume that the drums in the deep means an invasion from the deep parts of Moria, which again has never happened in the years that they've been here. And they've not just been hiding and trying to keep a low profile. They've been going, we've had the Raiders of the Lost Axe. We've had the search for the Something Helm. We've been finding armories. We've been going west to Holland Gate. The doors have been out all over the place. And they've not been having orc problems until orcs invaded from outside. Yeah. I agree, Trifle. I think it's likely the Balrog was never involved. I don't see the only thing. There are only two things, both very indirect, which even potentially hint at Balrogian involvement in this final battle. One is just the reference to drums in the deep, and Gimli's interpretation of that, which we will read later on. I'm referring to Gimli's reference to the beater of the drums, singular. So Gimli seems to have a notion about the drums in the deep. But we'll come back to that. The other thing, honestly, is the reference to the Watcher in the water. Let me explain. Again, there's no evidence that they're having internal orc problems. The orc problems are from outside. But there is evidence that non-orc agents in and around Moria are being activated. When he says the pool is up to the wall at Westgate, that tells me that the pool wasn't always up to the wall at Westgate, or they wouldn't have been surprised to see that. The fact that he wrote the pool is up to the wall at Westgate, we know they went to Westgate, right? I mean, a long time before, as far as we can tell, in the previous passage. And we have no reason to think they didn't make it. If they made it now, they probably made it back then at the high point of their activity, right? So, yeah, they probably got there. The reference to the pool sounds like they're familiar with the idea. He just doesn't say, there's a pool at Westgate. He says, the pool is up to the wall. So this tells me that they did go to Westgate before. And when they went to Westgate, they found a pool, but the pool wasn't up to the wall and nobody got et. Right? Exactly, Nancy. They obviously knew that there was a pool. Exactly. So, Dr. Will says, next patient I see, I should say there's no evidence that you're having internal orc problems. So it could be worse, right? Your patient should be appreciative of that. Yeah. So, the pool is not new. I don't think the Watcher in the water is new to them. I think they knew about it. They have a name for it. And let's face it, the Watcher in the water, which we can now call him that because we've gotten to this passage. The Watcher in the water is weird, right? I mean, it's weird. We don't even know what it is, right? It's weird, and they don't. I mean, if all that happened was they discovered, like, oh my gosh, a pool, and then these, like, tentacles all reach out and drag Owen under the water, they would have come back and been like, OMG, some eldritch tentacular creature just busted out of the water and ate Owen. Right? They wouldn't have said, and they wouldn't be like, what should we call him? Let's name him the Watcher in the Water. And I shall write that in the notes, right? I think they knew about the pool. I think they knew about the Watcher. They named him. There's a Watcher in that water out there. And that Watcher in the water, whom they know about, took Owen. Because the pool was up to the wall at Westgate. I bet you Owen tried to see if they could still make it across. Remember, the purpose, as far as we can see, of the Westgate expedition was to see if they could escape that way. And they weren't going to let, I bet you, a wetting in the pool, even that pool, prevent them. I mean, certain death, back behind. Can we cross? Can we get around? Can we skirt the edge of this pool? But Owen, there's a thing in there. I know. But we have to see. Dr. Benway says maybe they heard the stories from Rohan. Lots of adaptation saltiness here today. Yeah, Anyway, then the Watcher in the Water takes Owen. And they're like, yeah, nope. Not possible. So Ori writes, we cannot get out. And yes, philologist me, I agree. The naming implies that maybe the Watcher hadn't done anything yet except watching. Yeah, agreed. They call it the Watcher in the Water. They seem to be aware of it, but they decided to risk it, right? Yeah. Now, why do I say the Water in the Water makes me think of the Balrog? Again, because it serves as some evidence that why is the pool higher? It's almost as if somebody was trying to close the back door to prevent the dwarves from escaping. There is a plan. It's clear that there was a plan. There is a plan to destroy the dwarves of New Khazad-dûm. There is an invasion from the east in order to bring that event about. And right at that moment, the pool at Westgate has grown larger right up to the wall, such that when they open the gate and try to cross, Owen gets nabbed. Somehow, the Watcher in the Water seems to have been alerted to this. So, something which has more capability than just sending an army of orcs is appearing to... There seems to be a collaboration here against the... It's possible it's just a coincidence. It's possible. But there seems to be some kind of active collaboration and conspiracy. And that is the thing that makes me ask myself the question, would the Balrog be in on this? If someone is orchestrating things with the Watcher in the Water... This doesn't prove, by the way, that the Watcher in the Water is an active participant in the conspiracy. Right? That somebody texted the Watcher in the Water and be like, hey, Squid Boy, you want to, pile up some extra rocks, make your dam extra high, and raise the level of the pool, right? So that we can, would you mind, right? It doesn't have to be that. All it would need is somebody else to say, I mean, hey, even orcs could have been sent to build up the dams and increase the pool size, so that then the Watcher in the Water would then just do his thing, right, more effectively. So that's possible. But I don't know. Fourth Dauntless says, let's say the Balrog is in on it. Why would it need a convoluted Bond villain plan instead of just coming up and smashing the annoying dwarves? Who's going to stop it? Well, it's not exactly a Bond villain plan. Also, first of all, we don't know that it didn't do it. Rise up. We don't know for sure that the drums in the deep are not connected to the Balrog. Exactly, Little Room Johnny. It's just a siege. There are two doors. They're closing them both. Right? The one they're invading in, the other they've sealed up. They've already found a convenient tentacular monster living by the other gate, which is handy, right? So let's just use that, and now we're good. And now the Balrog doesn't have to bestir himself because, maybe he doesn't want to. I have no idea. But yeah, I agree. We don't have any clear evidence that the Balrog was involved. But there are the marks of if not a conspiracy, a long-term plan. Like somebody planned this. Somebody increased the pool so that it would be impossible to escape past the Watcher on the other side. Dr. Benway, did Balin go to Moria expecting to deal with Durin's Bane? They seem to have left that out of their planning. But in Tolkien's defense, this seems to be a thing that dwarves do. Right? I mean, Balin was already involved in an invasion of Erebor that took the slaying of the dragon, that did not take the slaying of the dragon into account. Right? So, it's not exactly, I'm not saying it's a good plan to leave the Balrog, to leave Durin's Bane out of your calculations. But I'm just saying you can't pretend it's totally unlike him. Totally out of character for Balin to leave that out of his calculations. Just saying. It has to have come up, right? I mean, you can't be a dwarf and not think about Durin's Bane when you think about Khazad Dûm, right? But nevertheless, like, they went. Did they have any plan? Were they working on a plan? Did they have a plan that they never got a chance to try out? I have no idea. Hey, I mean, maybe they had a really good plan. Maybe their plan was so good that the Balrog never bothered. Maybe the Balrog texted Sauron, right? As I suggested before. Could you please send an invasion force, right? They, these annoying dwarves have found, Balrog kryptonite, and I can't go up there. So if you wouldn't mind sending an invasion force to orcs, I'd really appreciate it. Right? Yes, and JJ also points out that passage in chapter 1 of The Hobbit, when Thorin says that they should go after the necromancer without having the faintest clue of who or what he actually was, right? Yeah, exactly. We don't know anything about Dol Guldur. We don't know anything about this guy and what he can do. We're just gonna, Now he's not yet setting out, right, on the war or the expedition there, but still, yeah. Anyway, so, yeah, and Dr. Benway, it does not seem the Balrog bothered them while they were there. There is no evidence they ever encountered him. So, the plan was really a success for quite some time, right? If there hadn't been an orc invasion from outside, if there hadn't been an orc invasion from outside, maybe they would have survived, right? Maybe they. I apologize for the noise. Maybe you're right. They had flame-resistant masks. Maybe that was the secret, just like with Glaurung back in the day, right? Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, they even started mining mithril again. So anyway, whatever. They had no Balrog problem. So as far as we know, Balin had a foolproof Balrog resistance plan. Or maybe he had Balrog repellent of some kind. Very possible. Yeah. Okay. Darn, it's late. Okay, sorry. Lost track of time there. We didn't get to talk too much about Gandalf's commentary. It's okay, we'll come back to it in the context. We're not exactly leaving the Book of Mazarbul here. So we'll talk about it in the context of going back. Yeah. Okay. So next week, after Textmoot, we're going to come back. Chad Bornholt is going to join me, and he's going to show us the runes. He'll superimpose. We'll look at the pages first, see what we can see, and then he's going to actually superimpose the runes onto the page here, and we'll see what this. We'll see what it looks like, and we'll see what else is there that Gandalf didn't read. Okay, so that'll be great fun. Thank you for joining me. Sorry for keeping everybody late, but we will move on to field trip time. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to next week, digging into the runes and discovering the some anyway of the lost story of Moria next time. So awesome. Let's shift to our field trip, which will have to be relatively brief tonight, but all right. Let me crash my game as always, and then start off. Here we go.
Hey there.
Good evening, Valori. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm trying to figure out. We got layered again, so I'm trying to figure out.
Oh yeah,
where
don't worry.
supposed to
I'm
be.
coming back in.
Okay, yeah, you might end up here with us. So.
I might, and in any case, I doubt that that Moria will be layered. So we'll catch up with each other.
Gosh, I hope not.
Not before.
But it might mean I don't get to fellow everybody.
All right, we will see.
As long as I get you and I get that big star on your head, it'll be easier to find.
Yeah, we'll be good. Okay. Let's see.
So, hypothesis. Are dwarves just natural pantsers, or do they really think that they can just beat anything when they feel like it?
Without weapons, even. I mean, just like spontaneity seems to be, something that's valued as far as I can see in dwarf society. Not big planners.
Well, it's some big rock energy there, I tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. But again, I don't want to, I don't want to malign Balin unnecessarily. Like I said, perhaps he'd thought about it a lot and had a really good plan. And then, and again, we have no evidence that it didn't work.
Secretive lot.
So
they're a secretive lot. They don't like to.
Playing it close to the vest.
Everything they have is a need-to-know basis.
Exactly.
All right, going to the 21st hall.
21st hall. And we discovered the feast hall for foreign dignitaries last time.
With the reception lounge.
Yeah, it's my favorite discovery we've made in a long time.
Yeah, that was fun.
Whole consistent narrative there. All right, let's head back to the same stable master.
May Durian return soon to his heart.
Which one was it? Eastern Crossroads? Because today we were scheduled to head down the road, right?
Yeah, we were going to ease on down the road, I believe.
Right. One thing actually, just as before we do that, I'm just going to peek up into Nude Melik again.
Mm-hmm.
Just real quick. Because I think if we come back down here, we head east here and look back down into the big hall that we can only see the upper branches of from here. And then we look at the map. This is the second hall. This one that we're looking down on is the second hall that they said they lost. That means that in Lotro's imagination, so actually this is going to be, now that I've confirmed this, this is going to be, and we have a brief field trip tonight anyway. This might be our field trip because here's what I'm thinking. This is a peculiarity as far as the visual design of the game is concerned, right? They have this main road. We saw that we just had, this like main presentation route and the theatrical, the theater seating around the reception area and then the feasting hall. We're expecting traffic coming through here and possibly important traffic. Why did they have the main road in from west to east across Moria lead to a cliff here? Why would the game designers make that particular choice? And I think
reinforce the thing that dwarves don't plan much out.
Well, possibly, but I have an idea about this. So there, on the one hand, the difference in altitude is clearly a result. They're following the book, right? Gandalf says it's many levels up from the gate, above the gates where they are at the 21st Hall, right? So that you would have to go down many stairs in order to get there is natural. But
where was the flooding happening?
The flooding that we found?
Didn't it mention the water was backed up from the water?
Oh no, the water that's just up to the wall at Westgate. So that's the external.
Oh, okay,
wall.
yeah, Westgate, gotcha.
Okay, so but now notice as we've been descending here. So again, there's going to be a change in altitude. Like this, that's following the book. But the game developers, had any number of ways in which they could have chosen to do that, right? Having chosen already to have a primary route from one side of Moria to the other, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And having built up that route in various ways as we've seen, why do this? Why have the descent, the shift in levels, happen in this way that we're having it happen, where it's like back and forth stairways going up a single wall, essentially.
All I can think of is like crowd control. Like it's more defensible if they break up the entry into a switchback.
Exactly. Oh. That's precisely my thought. So look, here we are.
I guessed.
Here we are in Orc in the second hall. Hey, look, it's an Orc in the second hall, right there. Anyway.
Oh yeah, there's.
So here we're in Orc. So we're now here. We are on the floor of the second hall. So we're an army of invading orcs that's just taken the bridge of Khazad Dûm, right? And we've overcome, Nali and everybody else, right? Nali and Loni and who held the bridge. And you come in here. In order to get up, the dwarves are up in the Chamber of Mazarbul, right? So they're way up top. This means, by the way, that from here, the orcs can get anywhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of side passages here. They're no longer in the funnel, the defensive funnel that ends at the bridge, right? After the bridge, it widens out. Now they're just in. They can go anywhere they want in Moria proper. But to get up to where the dwarves are, they have to basically scale this wall up this set of switchbacks, right? So I suspect that Locho designed this particular approach, like the boundary between the second hall and the pathways in up towards the 21st hall.
Yeah, now I'm wondering about the railings, because if they don't make sense for that kind of height, maybe they make sense in another way, like maybe spears were supposed to be leaning against that.
Who knows? Yeah,
or
maybe.
Alternate ammunition
because,
for archers.
So, Ori is writing in the book of Mazarbul from the chamber, and the orcs, and says that the orcs have past tense overrun the second hall, that they have not also immediately also overrun the fact that the dwarves are not already dead. And not only are they not dead, they are secure enough that they can survive for enough days for a squad to go to Westgate and back to report on the pool before the final attack happens, right? So they managed the dwarves clearly managed to keep, even after the orcs had overrun the bridge in the second hall, they managed to keep the orcs from getting them or finding them at the chamber of Mazarbul for at least a week. You got to think, at least a week, right?
Yeah.
So this layout helps, I think, to explain it. Because...
Decorative, though.
Well, it's beautiful. Because, again, they can't just make it like a purely defensive structure. Because when the original dwarves were building this, I mean, they may have been thinking that. Like, this is the final fallback position if an enemy did invade and took the gate and took the bridge. They would still be able to retreat up these stairs, and the enemy would have to fight their way up and around the corner and up and around the corner, right? That's still something that would have to happen. And so therefore that makes this transition where they, by which again, I mean the designers, have created this additional defensive point. Because I'm going to run my way back up there. And you can see that
Makes
this
me wonder
is...
about the symbolism of the trees. Maybe the dwarves think trees are a darker omen than elves do.
Well, I don't know. I mean, well...
But I do feel like this was made in deference to the elves, though.
I think
it's
so,
like,
too.
look, you like trees. We made these for you.
So we know for a fact that they received foreign dignitaries from the east as well.
Yeah.
Because
that would
we
make sense
know
with
that
Galadriel,
Galadriel came here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I suspect that the trees in this hall are in recognition of the elves of Lothlorien who are coming
All
in.
you pointy jerks like trees, right?
Right. Yeah, no, this is to make them feel at home. But, and again, I don't think that the original designers, the original dwarves who made this wall were necessarily saying, we must make this for defense, because there are alternate routes, right? The stairs are really broad. This is not designed like a defensive stairway inside a fortress. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
But
yet,
also switchbacks are a little easier on joints as well. And
it's true. It's true.
It-
Yeah, no, you could see
like
how
the
the original
Winchester
dwarves. As we said, when we were down there on the floor looking at it, the whole thing is really impressive, right? It looks like another great gate, except it's a great stairway, and even more impressive in its way than just like one big stairway which goes straight up for a really long
well,
time.
the switchback also gives you like really good views.
Yeah. To enjoy
you get to
the beauties
to
of this
show
hall
off.
from multiple directions. Yeah, and multiple levels. Absolutely. So
But
no,
also they can take a break when they get to the landing, like most of us do.
yeah. What are they called? They had these in the stairs when I was at Whitby last year. Coffin rests, they're called. The extra long steps, so that when you're carrying a coffin up to the churchyard, which was on top of the steps, Lucy's churchyard from Dracula,
Oh God, yeah, cool.
you could there were like I forget how many there were, 10 or 11 like extra wide steps, which is where you could like put the coffin down and rest on your way up, because there's like 150 steps up the cliff.
I was thinking more like when I visit Currituck Lighthouse at Outer Banks, I always have to stop at those little platforms in between the stairs.
Exactly.
Same thing with Teotihuacan, because those steps were not made to be gracefully ascended or descended.
Right. Anyway, the point is, I think that there is a memory of the fact that clearly the orcs, we don't know anything about how or why, right? But we know that the orcs, after they invaded, they were thwarted here. Thwarted from just following right behind the retreating dwarves. They were somehow held off. And I think that this wall and these stairs are a big part of it. That a defense here could be made long enough to slow the invading orcs down, even after they've crossed the bridge. And then, of course, once you get up here again, so now, because what I'm doing here is I'm imagining this as Moria. This is what the game is inviting us to imagine, right? The game is inviting us to imagine that this is the Moria that the orcs invaded, and that the dwarves were trying to defend. And so therefore, if this were, again, so many switchbacks, so many stairs, so many opportunities to slow them down, to roll things down on them, to mess things up for the invaders. And then, even if they just manage to slow them down enough, by the time they get up here, here's the top, right? All paths lead to this hallway up here.
Calves would be cramping up like heck.
And once the orcs get up here, now where do they go? Right. Now they would have, from here, as we know, we just took a swift goat down, right? From here to the Chamber of Mazarbul is not a direct line, right?
No, it's a very twisty path, and
So
easy
the
to get
dwarves
lost.
it could have taken them a long time to find them where they were. So yeah, I think I think that they were, because if the only fact that the developers had was the mere fact that there has to be a significant change in elevation between here and the floor of the second hall, if that was the only fact that they had, there were lots of choices they could have made. But I think that the choices they've made suggest that perhaps they're remembering this, that the threshold between the second hall and the hallways here, which do lead directly to, though somewhat twistingly, to the 21st hall and the Chamber of Mazarbul, where the dwarves were, suggest that they were thinking of this as a major threshold. I mean, goodness, even the fact that that's where they put the boundary between the two map portions, right? Between Zelen.
Well, and that's what I
Mood
noticed.
Melek.
It's like we have our main highway thoroughfares, and then they keep petering out into these twisty, turny corridors where everything looks the same. It's like
Yes.
it's very clear that even the good guests and the dignitaries were not meant to come in here without an escort.
Right. Yes, I agree. And they probably would, especially the dignitaries, surely would have gotten a guide, right?
You wonder if that was a negotiation tactic of,
Exactly.
let's make them go around in a couple, let them do a couple of laps in this area here.
Come in here
They
and
get
we can
suspicious.
negotiate. And then part of our
Yeah.
negotiation tactics will be, you do want a guide out, don't you?
Or one of the negotiation tactics is, would you like some water?
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, I do think that there's I think that that passage, that part of the book, and we know that they're paying careful attention to that. You know, the Lotra developers, when they were developing Moria, they obviously paid very careful attention to every word that the text says about Moria, because we don't get that many, right?
Yeah.
And so I mean, that's why, for instance, again, if I look back at the big map, right, that's why we get the waterworks. Why did they have a whole section way deep in the bottom called the waterworks? Because there's that passage where they can hear a sound that sounds like a watermill turning down beneath them in the chasms, remember? Right, there's that one brief reference, and so they're like, oh, well, clearly, there's going to be waterworks down below, right?
Yeah.
There's there's the
Sorry.
loads under the Red Horn, right, under Karathras, which is yeah.
Amathorn made the comment reminding us that we have to keep leading the elves out of the hedge maze. So
Yes.
beautiful scenery is also a strong arm tactic for negotiations.
It can have that element. Yes, absolutely. So anyway, like I said, it's very clear that the Lotra developers paid attention to every moment. So the fact that they call this the second hall, they are thinking. You can see even on the map here. Here's the bridge over the chasm, and here's the gate in the first hall, and the bridge over the chasm in the second hall. They thought a lot about that transition, and I think it's in light of thinking about the passage from the Book of Mazarbul, I think it's a really interesting. Some interesting choices that they made there that work out pretty
Interesting to think how many halls are numbered and in what order and why.
well. Agreed. All right. Well, again, it's super late, so I'll let folks go. Next time we will, in fact, go deeper into Zelamelech here, go down the road and see what's beyond the feasting hall here, and what do things look like down the road. So we'll get there next time. But in the meantime, have a good week, everybody, and I will see you guys next week. Bye now.
Fun.